The autumn of 1815 had been the season of Rosalind Pembroke's greatest triumph and most painful memory. At 22 years of age, Lady Rosalind, second daughter of the Viscount Pembroke of Willows Higher, had entered London society 3 years prior with the kind of hope that made young hearts vulnerable. Her family's estate in the Yorkshire countryside was comfortable but unremarkable. Her dowry respectable but not extraordinary. She possessed what her mother generously called a spirited intelligence and uncommon grace, qualities that drew interest but rarely inspired the fervent devotion promised in novels. She had been what society termed a sensible choice for a second son or a gentleman of moderate means. Not the diamond of the season who commanded ballrooms, nor the heiress who attracted fortune hunters. Simply Rosalind Pembroke, pleasant, well-read, accomplished at the pianoforte, and hopelessly romantic beneath her practical exterior. And then Lieutenant Nathaniel Thorne had walked into her life during the summer of 1813, and everything she thought she knew about love and happiness had shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces that cut deeper than glass. What she didn't know then, what she couldn't have possibly known as she stood in her modest drawing-room wearing a wedding dress that would never see a ceremony, was that the man who would truly change her life was already watching from the shadows. His name was Edmund Ashcroft. And he was about to become her salvation, and her everything. The summer of 1813 arrived in London with oppressive heat that made even elegant drawing-rooms suffocating. Rosalind Pembroke had been enduring her second season with resigned grace, understanding her place in society's carefully ordered hierarchy. At 20, she had learned to temper expectations, smiling politely when younger, prettier girls were swept onto dance floors while she stood beside the potted palms with the other, sensible choices. That was why Lieutenant Nathaniel Thorne's attention at the Crawford ball left her so utterly unprepared. He appeared like something from the novels she kept hidden beneath her pillow, tall and devastatingly handsome in his regimental uniform, dark hair swept back from a face designed to make hearts flutter. But it wasn't just his appearance that stole her breath that warm June evening. It was the way he looked at her, as if she were the only woman in a room full of London's most celebrated beauties. "Lady Rosalind," he said, bowing over her gloved hand with a smile that made her forget proper breathing. "I've been watching you all evening, and I simply cannot forgive myself if I don't request the honor of a dance." Her mother nudged her sharply when she stood frozen. "I would be delighted, Lieutenant Thorne," she finally managed, and then she was in his arms, waltzing across polished floors while chandeliers spun overhead like captured stars. From that moment, Nathaniel Thorne became the sun around which her world revolved. He called the very next afternoon with flowers her lady's maid whispered cost more than he could likely afford on a lieutenant's salary. He took her driving in Hyde Park, where other young ladies turned to stare with undisguised envy. He attended every ball, every musicale, every garden party where she might appear, always seeking her out with that particular smile meant only for her. "You have the most extraordinary mind," he told her one evening as they walked through the Pembroke garden, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. "Most young ladies speak only of fashion and gossip, but you, Rosa, you understand poetry, philosophy, the world beyond these drawing-rooms." Rosa. He was the first outside her family to use it, and the intimacy made her heart race. "You flatter me, Lieutenant," she protested, though she couldn't suppress her smile. "Nathaniel," he corrected gently. "And it isn't flattery when it's truth." He paused beside her mother's rose bushes, turning to face her with intensity that made her breath catch. "You deserve to be cherished, Rosa. You deserve to be seen for the remarkable woman you are." She was utterly, completely, devastatingly in love. Her friend Beatrice Fairchild tried to counsel caution. "He's very charming, Rosa, but what do you know of his family, his prospects?" "He's a war hero," Rosalind replied defensively. "He served with distinction. And he loves me, truly loves me." Her father expressed quiet concerns about a second son with limited means, but she insisted Nathaniel saw her, not her dowry. The most unsettling warning came from Edmund Ashcroft, Duke of Thornfield. At 32, he was one of England's most eligible bachelors, though his stern demeanor intimidated most young ladies. Rosalind had spoken to him exactly 3 times in 2 years, each conversation brief and oddly intense. The fourth came at the Duchess of Worthington's ball. She'd stepped onto the terrace for air when the Duke's voice emerged from the shadows. "Lady Rosalind." His presence filled the space. "Forgive me, but I feel compelled to offer counsel." Something in his tone made her defensive. "Counsel? Lieutenant Thorne. I urge you to exercise caution." Her spine stiffened. "I don't understand your meaning, Your Grace." A young officer with expensive tastes and limited means, suddenly pursuing the daughter of a respectable family. Perhaps his affections might not be as pure as they appear. Heat flooded her cheeks, anger, not embarrassment. "You know nothing of his character. He is a gentleman who has shown me genuine regard." "Has he?" Something flickered in his expression. "Then I pray I am mistaken." "Truly." He paused. "Should you ever need assistance, for any reason, you may call upon me." She dismissed his warning as cynicism from a man who'd forgotten genuine feeling. When Nathaniel proposed 3 weeks later, dropping to one knee in her father's library with a ring that must have cost months of salary, she accepted without hesitation, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You've made me the happiest man in England," he whispered, kissing her hand with fervent devotion. "I promise you, Rosa, I will spend every day proving myself worthy of this honor." She believed him utterly. The engagement was announced in the Morning Post. Wedding preparations began immediately, her mother insisting on September for agreeable weather. Nathaniel was attentive, devoted, everything a fiancé should be. He brought small gifts, wrote poetry that made her blush, spoke of their future with such beautiful certainty that she fell asleep each night with a smile on her lips. Lady Pembroke fussed over wedding gown fabric. The church was reserved. Invitations were addressed to 200 guests. Rosalind's trousseau was ordered from London's finest modistes. Every detail fell into perfect place, like pieces of a puzzle forming the picture of her future happiness. But as the wedding date approached, whispers began to circulate. September 15th dawned with golden light that seemed to mock what was about to unfold. Rosalind stood before the mirror in ivory silk, layers of delicate lace over satin, seed pearls sewn along the bodice, sleeves that whispered like promises. Her mother had wept when she'd first tried it on. Now, as her lady's maid arranged the veil, Rosalind felt only hollow excitement. St. George's Church in Hanover Square held 200 guests, everyone who mattered in their world. Morning sun streamed through stained glass, casting colored light across white roses. Rosalind waited in the vestibule with her father, listening to the organist while her heart hammered. "You look beautiful, my dear," the Viscount said softly, though his hand trembled. "I'm so happy, Papa," she whispered, believing it. The church doors would open. She would walk down that aisle. Nathaniel would be waiting. Their future would begin. Except the doors didn't open. Minutes passed. The organist repeated the same piece. Rosalind's smile felt painted on. Her father shifted, glanced toward the church, then back with an unreadable expression. More minutes. Confused voices drifted from inside. Rosalind's hands went cold. Something was wrong. A messenger appeared, breathless, carrying a sealed letter. Rosalind watched her father read it, watched his face drain of color, watched his hands shake. "Papa?" Her voice came out small. He handed her the letter with anguish in his eyes. The handwriting was Nathaniel's. But these words bore no resemblance to poetry. "My dear Lady Rosalind, I write with news that will cause distress. This morning, I wed Miss Arabella Bennet at a private ceremony. Her regard for me, combined with her considerable fortune of £20,000, presented an opportunity one could not refuse. You must understand, a man in my position must think practically. I trust you will find it in your heart to forgive this necessary change of plans. I remain, with respect, Lieutenant Nathaniel Thorne *. The words swam before her eyes. He had married someone else. This morning. While she was putting on this dress. While 200 guests filled this church. While she believed in a future already sold for £20,000. Rosa. Her father's voice broke. The guests. I have to tell them. She didn't know where the words came from. Some desperate need for dignity. She walked into that church on legs made of glass. Every eye turned, the beautiful bride in ivory silk and pearls. Whispers spread like wildfire. Where was the groom? Her mother stood, hand pressed to her mouth. Rosalind saw Beatrice's horrified expression. She saw the Duchess of Worthington lean to whisper. She saw it all with terrible clarity. There will be no wedding today, she announced, her voice steady despite the earthquake inside. Lieutenant Thorne has married another. I ask that you respect my family's privacy. The church erupted. Gasps, exclamations, scandal spreading through London's elite like poison. Rosalind turned and walked back down that aisle, past every shocked face, past every pitying look, past every person who would spend the evening discussing her humiliation. The carriage ride home passed in silence. Her mother wept. Her father stared out the window with murder in his eyes. Rosalind felt nothing. The numbness was almost mercy. In her bedroom, she stood before the mirror, that stranger in the wedding dress. This gown made with such hope, that would never serve its purpose. She sent her maid away. She needed to do this herself. The buttons down her back were impossibly small. Her fingers shook. Tears started then, hot and relentless, blurring her vision as she fought with silk and lace. When the dress finally pooled at her feet, she collapsed onto her bed. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, tearing sounds that hurt her throat. She pressed her face into her pillow, but they wouldn't stop. Everything she believed, everything she'd hoped for, every word he'd spoken, all lies. All calculated manipulation for £20,000. The shame was worse than the heartbreak. How many had tried to warn her? Beatrice, her father, the Duke. Especially the Duke. Perhaps his affections might not be as pure as they appear. She'd been so righteously indignant, so certain they were wrong. What a fool she'd been. Night fell. Rosalind lay in darkness, still in her chemise, her wedding dress crumpled on the floor like the corpse of her dreams. Her eyes were swollen shut. Her throat raw. Her chest physically ached as if something inside had broken beyond repair. She'd been abandoned at the altar. Left for someone wealthier. Humiliated before all of society. Her reputation ruined. Her prospects destroyed. Her heart shattered beyond recognition. 3 days later, as she lay in her darkened bedroom refusing all visitors, a knock came at the door that would change everything. Rosalind had spent 3 days in darkness. Curtains drawn, meals untouched, her mother's pleading unanswered. She lay in bed wrapped in numbness, staring at shadows, unable to feel anything but emptiness. When the knock came on the 4th morning, she assumed it was another attempt to coax her into eating. "Go away," she called hoarsely. "Lady Rosalind." Her father's voice was firm. "The Duke of Thornfield is here to see you." She sat up, head spinning. Edmund Ashcroft. The last person she'd expected, and perhaps the last she wanted to face. He'd warned her. He'd tried to tell her. "I'm not receiving visitors. Rosa, please." He's been most insistent. Something in her father's tone made her pause. Not just request, but urgency. Perhaps even hope. Against her better judgment, she rose, caught sight of herself, tangled hair, pale blotchy face, same chemise and dressing gown for 3 days, and nearly laughed at the bitter irony. She tied the dressing gown tighter and descended like a ghost haunting her own life. Edmund stood in the drawing room, too large for the modest space, wearing dark riding clothes, hair windswept as if he'd ridden hard to get here. When he saw her, something flickered in his dark eyes. Lady Rosalind. He bowed. Your Grace. She didn't curtsy. I'm told you wish to speak with me. Privately, if I may. She should have insisted on a chaperone. But what did propriety matter now? She nodded, and he closed the door. The silence stretched. Rosalind stood near the window, unable to look at him directly. I want you to know, Edmund began quietly, I take no pleasure in being proven correct. How magnanimous. I haven't come to gloat or remind you I warned you. I've come with a proposition. She laughed bitterly. A proposition. Do all men see me as an opportunity now? Please, just listen. His voice carried intensity that made her meet his gaze. What happened to you, all of London knows. The scandal will follow you for years. Your prospects are destroyed. Which is precisely why I'm asking you to marry me. She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I beg your pardon. Marry me, Rosalind. Become my Duchess. Is this some cruel joke? I came because I've been in love with you for 2 years. The words erupted with startling rawness. Since I first saw you at Lady Worthington's ball, arguing about Byron's poetry. You wore pale green, and you laughed, and I fell in love with you that night. Rosalind sank onto the settee. You what? I should have declared myself before Thorn appeared. But I'm 32, Rosalind. I've seen enough of society to know I terrify most young ladies. My title, my reputation, they intimidate. And you seemed so young, so full of hope. I thought I'd wait. He laughed bitterly. I thought wrong. When I warned you about him, it wasn't cynicism. I had him investigated. Second son of a minor baron, deeply in debt, known for courting wealthy ladies. I tried to tell you, but I couldn't humiliate you with specifics. And you wouldn't have believed me anyway. No, she whispered. I wouldn't have. Marry me, he said, voice raw with vulnerability. Not out of pity. Marry me because I can give you everything he couldn't, protection, respect, a position so unassailable that no one will dare speak ill of you. Marry me because I will spend every day proving I chose you, not your dowry or connections, but you. Tears stung her eyes. I can't love you back. My heart is broken. I don't think I can ever trust anyone again. I know. His hand came up, hesitating near her face before dropping. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to let me love you. To give me the chance to show you what real devotion looks like. Separate rooms if you wish. No pressure, no demands. Just partnership and time. Why would you want a wife who can't love you? Because even having you near me, knowing you're safe and protected, would be more happiness than I've ever known. He stood, putting distance between them. Think about it. You don't have to answer now. He moved toward the door, and panic seized her. Not at losing him, exactly, but at being alone again. At facing a future as the girl left at the altar. Wait. Edmund turned, hope flaring in his expression. If I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, you promise you won't expect more than I can give? I promise. And separate rooms? Complete privacy? Whatever you need. Rosalind looked at him, truly looked for perhaps the first time. Not the intimidating Duke, but Edmund Ashcroft. A man who claimed to have loved her for 2 years. Who had tried to protect her. Who was offering salvation without demanding anything in return. It wasn't love. It would never be the fairy tale she'd imagined with Nathaniel. But it was real. And perhaps real was better than fantasy. Yes, she heard herself say. I'll marry you. His face transformed, relief and joy and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Thank you. Rosalind, I swear, you won't regret this. She wasn't sure that was true. But as he left to make arrangements, she felt something stir in the emptiness inside her. Not hope, exactly. But maybe the possibility of hope. The wedding was arranged for 3 weeks hence. This time, the groom would appear, but would the bride's heart ever recover? The wedding took place on a grey October morning in the Pembroke family chapel. 20 guests, not 200. Immediate family only. No white roses, no elaborate decorations. Just simple arrangements and a vicar who spoke quickly. Rosalind wore cream silk, lovely, but understated. No veil this time. She couldn't bear the symbolism. Her mother helped her dress, tears streaming. "You're making the right choice," Lady Pembroke whispered. "The Duke is a good man. He'll protect you." Protect. Not love. Not cherish. Protect. Edmund stood at the altar in formal black. When their eyes met, something softened in his expression. He took her hand gently, as if she might break. The ceremony passed in a blur. Each, yes, felt like another piece of armor between her shattered heart and the world. When the vicar pronounced them married, Edmund kissed her cheek, chaste, brief, respectful. Nothing like the passionate kiss Nathaniel had stolen. This was a business arrangement. Nothing more. The wedding breakfast was subdued. Polite toasts about new beginnings. Then she was handed into Edmund's carriage for the journey to Thornfield Hall. The ride took 3 hours, mostly in silence. Rosalind stared out the window at the passing countryside turning autumn gold. Edmund sat across from her, reading correspondence, occasionally glancing up with what might have been concern. "Are you cold?" he asked once. "There's a blanket." "I'm fine." He nodded and returned to his letters. When Thornfield Hall finally came into view, Rosalind felt her breath catch despite herself. It wasn't a house, it was a palace. Massive stone wings sprawling across manicured grounds, windows gleaming in the afternoon sun, gardens that seemed to stretch forever. This was power made physical. This was what she'd gained by marrying practical instead of passionate. The staff assembled in the entrance hall, dozens of them, from the butler to the lowest housemaid. Edmund introduced her formally. "Your new mistress, the Duchess of Thornfield." They curtsied and bowed, murmuring respectful greetings, and Rosalind felt the weight of the title settle on her shoulders like lead. A housekeeper named Mrs. Porter led her on a tour. The East Wing, the West Wing, the morning room, the music room, the portrait gallery filled with centuries of Ashcroft staring down with judgmental painted eyes. Rosalind's head spun with the vastness of it all. "Your private apartments are in the East Wing, Your Grace," Mrs. Porter said, opening a door to reveal a suite that was larger than her entire bedroom at home. "His Grace's chambers are in the West Wing." Separate wings. Just as he'd promised. The entire length of the house between them. That evening, they dined in awkward formality in a dining room that could seat 40. Edmund at one end of the impossibly long table, Rosalind at the other, servants moving silently between them. The food was exquisite. The conversation was stilted. "I hope your rooms are comfortable," Edmund offered. "Yes, thank you. If you need anything changed." "They're fine." Silence but for the click of silverware on china. "Tomorrow I thought I might show you the gardens, if you're interested." "Perhaps." More silence. It stretched between them like the vast table, filling the spaces where intimacy should have been. After dinner, Edmund escorted her to her apartments. They stood outside her door, two strangers bound by vows. "Rosalind," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I want you to know, you're safe here. This is your home now. No one will hurt you again." "Thank you, Your Grace." "Edmund," he corrected gently. "You're my wife. You can call me Edmund." But she couldn't. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "Good night, Your Grace." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, perhaps, or pain, but he bowed. "Good night, Rosalind. Sleep well." She closed the door and leaned against it, surveying her new prison. Because that's what it felt like, despite the silk wallpaper and velvet curtains. A beautiful cage. She'd traded one dream for another kind of imprisonment. Her lady's maid, a girl named Mary who'd been assigned to her, helped her undress. The wedding gown came off, was carefully hung away. Another wedding dress, another night that wasn't what it should have been. But at least this time, there was no abandonment. Just emptiness. She lay in the massive bed, in rooms larger than anything she'd ever known, in a house that echoed with centuries of privilege and power, and cried silently into her pillow. Not for what she'd lost anymore, but for what she'd never have. Not love. Not passion. Just this careful, respectful distance. This marriage of convenience that would be her life now. In the West Wing, Edmund sat in his study, staring at nothing. His wife, was crying. He could feel it somehow, even across the length of the house. She was crying, and he'd promised not to pressure her, promised to give her space and time. So he sat alone, holding a glass of brandy he didn't drink, and wondered how long it would take to win her heart. If he ever could. Months passed in this careful arrangement, two souls orbiting each other like distant planets, until one winter evening changed everything. December arrived with brutal cold. Snow blanketed Thornfield's grounds, and frost-painted windows. Rosalind had settled into careful routine, breakfast alone, walks in the conservatory, afternoons in the library, dinners at opposite ends of that impossibly long table. Edmund remained respectful, distant, true to his word. They were polite strangers sharing a house. Until the fever came. It started as a chill she couldn't shake, then a relentless headache. By evening, Rosalind was burning. The doctor was summoned, but snow had made roads treacherous. It would be morning before he arrived. Rosalind drifted in fevered dreams. Back in her wedding dress, but the church kept changing. Nathaniel was there, then he wasn't. Edmund stood in shadows, reaching for her. Rosa. A voice cut through the delirium. Edmund sat beside her bed, his face etched with concern. You have a fever. The doctor can't get through until morning. I'm not leaving you alone. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. His hand was gentle with the cool cloth. Let me help you. She was too weak to argue. Through the night, he stayed. When she shivered, he added warmth. When she burned, he brought cool water. When she murmured incoherently, he spoke softly. You're safe, Rosa. I'm here. Nathaniel left me, she mumbled in delirium. I know. Edmund's voice was tight. I'm not him. I'm not leaving. Everyone leaves. Not me. His hand found hers. Never me. The fever broke near dawn. Rosalind woke to grey light and Edmund asleep in the chair beside her bed, her hand still clasped in his. He'd stayed. All night. His face looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, cravat loosened. He'd stayed. She studied him, this man who'd married her asking nothing in return. For the first time, she noticed the strength in his features, the gentleness in his expression. He wasn't conventionally handsome like Nathaniel. But there was something solid about him. Something real. You're awake. His eyes opened, and relief flooded his face. Thank God. How do you feel? Weak. But better. She looked at their joined hands. You stayed. I told you I would. He squeezed her fingers gently. Are you hungry? I can have cook prepare something light. Edmund. His name felt strange on her tongue, the first time she'd used it. Why did you really marry me? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I love you. I've told you that. But why? What did you see in me? I'm not beautiful like the women you could have had. I'm not particularly accomplished. I was foolish enough to fall for a fortune hunter. I'm damaged now. Broken. Why would you want? Rosalind, stop. He leaned forward, still holding her hand. Do you want to know what I saw that first night? At Lady Worthington's ball? She nodded, unable to speak. I saw a woman arguing passionately about poetry with her friend. Defending Byron's work against those who dismissed it as scandalous. You were so animated, so alive, so completely yourself without apology. And when you laughed, he smiled at the memory. When you laughed, it was genuine. Not the practiced laugh society ladies use. Real joy. He paused. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. My title, my wealth, my connections. But you were arguing about poetry. You cared about ideas, about art, about things that mattered. I fell in love with your mind before I even knew your name. Tears stung her eyes. I've been so cold to you. You've been hurt. There's a difference. His thumb traced gentle circles on her hand. I don't need you to love me, Rosa. But I hope, someday, you might let yourself be happy again. Even if that happiness doesn't include loving me back. I don't know if I remember how to be happy. Then let me help you remember. He stood, reluctantly releasing her hand. Rest now. I'll have breakfast sent up. The doctor should arrive soon. Edmund. She caught his sleeve. Thank you. For staying. Something warm flickered in his eyes. Always. The doctor confirmed the fever had broken. Rosalind spent the next days recovering, and Edmund visited each afternoon, bringing books from the library, reading aloud when her eyes grew tired. They talked, really talked, for the first time. About books and politics and the estate. About his loneliness growing up with the weight of the title. About her dreams of traveling beyond England's shores. Did you mean it? She asked one evening as he prepared to leave. That you don't need me to love you back. I meant it. But you want me to. He paused in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. Yes. But wanting and needing are different things. I want you to be happy, Rosa. Even if that happiness never includes me. After he left, Rosalind lay in the darkness, something shifting inside her. Not love, not yet. But maybe the first crack in the ice around her heart. The first possibility that she might, someday, feel again. For the first time since Nathaniel's betrayal, she fell asleep without crying. After that winter night, something had shifted between them, though neither dared speak of it directly. Spring arrived at Thornfield with an explosion of color that mirrored something awakening inside Rosalind. Daffodils and tulips painted the grounds, cherry blossoms drifting like snow. After the long winter, the world felt reborn. And perhaps she did too. It started small. Instead of breakfast alone, Rosalind descended to the morning room where Edmund sat reading the Times. That first morning, he looked up with such surprise and hope she'd almost retreated. May I join you? Please. He set down his paper, pulled out her chair himself. I was hoping you might. The first breakfast passed in companionable silence. By the third morning, Edmund was sharing amusing anecdotes about his steward's ongoing war with the head gardener. By week's end, Rosalind was laughing, actually laughing, at his observations about estate politics. You're telling me Mr. Miller and Mr. Brown haven't spoken in 3 weeks because of a hedge? Not just any hedge. Edmund's eyes sparkled. The one separating the kitchen garden from ornamental beds. Apparently, it's a matter of deep philosophical importance whether herbs are vegetables or decorations. That's ridiculous. That's Thornfield. He grinned. Welcome to your new domain. The easy mornings led to afternoons in the library, Edmund sharing estate matters with her. Not because he had to, but because he wanted her opinion. Ledgers spread across the desk, tenant arrangements, crop rotations discussed with the respect he'd show a business partner. "You don't have to include me in all this," Rosalind said one afternoon. "I want to." Edmund glanced up. "You're the Duchess. This is as much your responsibility as mine. Besides, you have excellent instincts." She felt warmth bloom in her chest. Nathaniel had praised her mind while dismissing her opinions. Edmund actually listened. The gardens became their refuge. Long walks as weather warmed, Edmund showing his favorite spots, sharing estate history. The ancient oak where his grandfather had proposed. The fountain his mother installed. The meadow where he'd played as a solitary child. "I always envied children who had siblings," he admitted as they walked the hedge maze. "Someone to share the burden of expectation. I had a sister who died of scarlet fever when I was 7. Rosalind surprised herself by sharing. After that, I was the only one. The pressure to marry well, to secure the family's future. I think that's why I was so desperate to believe Nathaniel." Edmund's hand found hers. No words, no pity. Just his fingers intertwining with hers in silent understanding. They stood hands linked, surrounded by spring blooms. When she looked up, something in his expression made her breath catch. "Rosa," he said softly, and the way he said her name made her heart stutter. She took a step closer. Edmund's hand cupped her face with such tenderness she wanted to weep. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his dark eyes searching hers. She rose on her toes. He lowered his head. Their lips were inches apart when voices erupted beyond the hedge, servants laughing. The spell shattered. They sprang apart, both breathing hard. "I should," Rosalind gestured toward the house. "Yes." Edmund ran a hand through his hair, looking undone. "Dinner is in an hour." She fled. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming intensity of what she'd almost done. That evening's dinner thrummed with new awareness. Every glance charged. Every word weighted. The season brought visitors, and Rosalind defended Edmund fiercely when Lady Ashworth called him austere. "The Duke is neither austere nor cold," Rosalind said firmly. "He's simply a man of substance. Those who know him understand his true character." She'd learned to see him clearly. The warmth beneath his reserve. The humor in his words. The kindness in his actions. One evening, Edmund found her in the conservatory examining his orchids. "They're extraordinary. I had no idea you grew these yourself. My mother loved orchids. After she died, I took over her greenhouse." He paused. A way to feel close to her. Not foolish. Beautiful. She touched a delicate bloom. "You're full of surprises, Edmund Ashcroft." He stood behind her, close enough that she felt his warmth. "As are you, Rosalind Ashcroft." She turned. They were face to face in the humid warmth. Her heart hammered. "Rosa," he whispered, and this time when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. His hand cupped her neck, thumb stroking her racing pulse. "Edmund." Her hands fisted in his waistcoat. They swayed together, the pull undeniable. His forehead touched hers. Another moment and... "Your Grace." Mrs. Porter called. "The Crawfords' carriage has arrived." They sprang apart, trembling. The Crawfords. Dinner guests she'd forgotten. As she moved past him, his hand caught hers. "Soon," he said quietly. "When you're ready." "I'll wait, but Rosa, soon." She nodded, unable to speak, and fled. That night, alone in her bed, Rosalind faced the truth she'd been avoiding. The ice around her heart hadn't just cracked. It had melted completely. She was falling in love with her husband. By summer of 1815, 2 years into their marriage, Rosalind finally understood what she'd been missing with Nathaniel, and what she'd found with Edmund. Real love wasn't passionate speeches. It was patient devotion. Shared laughter. Gentle understanding. And the growing certainty that she couldn't spend one more night in separate wings when everything in her screamed to be close to him. The question wasn't if anymore. It was only when. Summer arrived with golden sunshine and warmth that made everything feel possible. Watching Edmund from the window as he helped the Thompsons repair their cottage roof, Rosalind finally admitted the truth she'd been dancing around for months. She loved him. Desperately, completely, irrevocably. He'd rolled up his sleeves, working alongside tenants as if he were just another man, not one of England's most powerful peers. When little Thomas Thompson tried to help by handing up nails, Edmund accepted each one with solemn gratitude. This was the man she'd almost missed. The man she'd been too blind to see while chasing Nathaniel's empty charm. The day crawled by. At dinner, Edmund told her about Thomas Thompson's declaration that he'd be a duke when he grew up. I told him he was welcome to try, though I warned him the paperwork was tedious. She laughed, but her hands trembled. Did he notice how she could barely eat? How she kept staring at him as if memorizing every detail? After dinner, Edmund escorted her to her wing. They stopped outside her door, tension radiating between them. "Rosalind," he began, "these past months, watching you bloom, hearing your laughter return, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. Even if this is all we ever have, I want you to know I'm grateful." He thought this was all they'd ever have. He'd resigned himself to companionship, believing she'd never want more. The fool. Her beautiful, patient fool. "Edmund." Her voice came out steady. "I need to tell you something, but not here. May I come to your rooms? Later tonight?" She watched emotions flash across his face, surprise, hope, caution. "Rosa, you don't have to. I'm ready." She touched his hand. "I've been ready for weeks. I was just too afraid to admit it." His fingers closed around hers. "Are you certain?" "More certain than I've ever been about anything." An hour later, wearing only nightdress and wrapper, Rosalind walked the length of Thornfield Hall. The West Wing had never felt so far, or so close. She knocked before she could lose courage. Edmund opened immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He wore only shirt and trousers, hair disheveled. His eyes widened. "Rosa. May I come in?" He stepped back, and she entered his sanctuary. Masculine and warm, leather chairs, books stacked everywhere, his cologne lingering. "I've been rehearsing a speech," she said. "Something eloquent about patience and trust. But standing here, all I can think is that I've wasted 2 years sleeping alone when I could have been with you. Rosalind. I love you." The words tumbled out. "I'm in love with you, Edmund. Not because you saved me, not out of gratitude, but because you're the best man I've ever known. Because you waited when I needed waiting and never demanded more than I could give. I love you, and I can't spend one more night pretending I don't." He stared at her. Then his face transformed with fierce joy. "Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Edmund Ashcroft." He crossed the space in 2 strides, cupping her face. "I've loved you for 4 years. For years of watching you, of lying awake knowing you were in the East Wing while I was here going slowly mad with wanting you. And now you're here, Rosa, are you absolutely certain? Kiss me and find out." He did. It wasn't gentle. It was years of restrained desire unleashed, mouths meeting with desperate hunger. Rosalind gasped, and he swallowed the sound, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy. "I love you," he murmured against her mouth. "God, Rosa, I love you so much." "Show me," she whispered. "No more separate wings. No more distance. Show me what we've been missing." What followed was tender and passionate and perfect, 2 years of devotion culminating in complete union. Edmund treated her like something precious and powerful, whispering love against her skin. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest. "I was such a fool," she murmured. "Wasting so much time being afraid." "You weren't a fool. You were healing." He kissed her forehead. "And I would have waited forever if that's what you needed." "No more waiting. I'm moving into the West Wing. Into your rooms. Into your life completely." His smile was incandescent. "Are you certain? People will talk. Let them talk. I'm the Duchess of Thornfield, and I'm madly in love with my husband." He laughed and pulled her back for another kiss. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Not in the last 5 minutes. You're getting terribly lax, Your Grace." "Then allow me to remedy that immediately." Morning found them still entwined, golden sunlight streaming through. Rosalind woke to Edmund watching her with such tenderness that tears pricked her eyes. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband. Any regrets?" "Only that we didn't do this 2 years ago." He kissed her, slow and thorough. "Then we'll just have to make up for lost time." And they did. 3 years of blissful marriage passed in a haze of love and happiness, until an autumn ball in 1818 forced the past to confront the present, and gave her the chance to show Nathaniel Thorne exactly what he'd thrown away. Autumn 1818 arrived painted in amber and crimson. 5 years had passed since that devastating morning at St. George's Church, and Rosalind could barely recognize the broken girl she'd been. That girl had died the day Nathaniel abandoned her. In her place stood the Duchess of Thornfield, confident, beloved, powerful. The invitation to the Devonshire House ball arrived weeks ago. Society events no longer filled her with dread. Not when she walked in on Edmund's arm. The evening of the ball, Mary helped her into deep sapphire silk that brought out her hazel eyes. Diamonds glittered at her throat, the Ashcroft diamonds, worn by duchesses for generations. When she descended to find Edmund waiting, his expression made her pulse race. "You're breathtaking," he said, offering his arm. "You're not so terrible yourself, Your Grace." Devonshire House blazed with light. When the Ashcrofts were announced, a ripple went through assembled guests. The crowd quite literally parted for them. "I'll never get used to that," Rosalind murmured. "You wear the title better than most born to it," Edmund replied. "You've earned their respect, Rosa." They made their way through, greeting acquaintances. Even Lady Ashworth, who'd once called Edmund austere, now fawned over them. Rosalind was laughing at something the Earl of Chester said when she felt Edmund's hand tighten on her waist. His expression had gone carefully neutral. "Edmund? What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just someone I haven't seen in years." She followed his gaze and froze. Nathaniel Thorne stood near the refreshment table, and the contrast to the man she'd known was shocking. His coat showed where at the cuffs. His face had a desperate, hungry look. Where once he'd moved through society with easy confidence, now he seemed diminished, seeking patronage like a beggar. "Rosa?" Edmund's voice cut through her paralysis. "We can leave if you'd like." "No." She straightened her spine. "He's nothing to me now." It was true. Looking at Nathaniel, she felt no lingering pain. Just distant pity for the pathetic figure he'd become. "What happened to him?" "Arabella Bennet left him within 2 years," Edmund said quietly. "Took most of her dowry back through the courts. He's deeply in debt, desperately seeking another wealthy match. None of the respectable families will have him." Justice, she thought. Cold and perfect. She deliberately turned her back, focusing on the Duchess of Worthington's story. But she was aware of Nathaniel moving through the crowd, of people politely excusing themselves, of cold shoulders and turned backs. Society remembered. They remembered the girl left at the altar. And who had done the leaving? "Dance with me," Edmund said suddenly. She looked up, saw protective fire in his eyes, and smiled. "Always." They swept onto the floor, moving together in perfect synchronization. They were the picture of marital devotion, of true partnership. From across the room, she caught Nathaniel staring. Recognition flickered, then confusion. He kept looking between her and Edmund, trying to reconcile what he saw. He didn't recognize her. She'd been so insignificant to him that even her face had faded. Or perhaps she'd simply changed that much. "He's watching us," Edmund murmured. "Let him watch. Let him see what he threw away." Edmund's hand tightened. "You are magnificent." "I'm happy." "That's better than magnificent." As the music ended, Rosalind caught Nathaniel's eye for just a moment. She saw him take in her gown, her jewels, Edmund's protective hand. Saw the moment he began to realize who she was. Saw the dawning horror spread across his face. "Rosa," Edmund said quietly. "He's coming this way." She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and prepared to face the man who'd broken her heart 5 years ago. Except this time, she held all the cards. This time, she was the Duchess of Thornfield, married to England's most powerful peer. And he was nothing but a memory she'd long since outgrown. As the evening progressed, Nathaniel worked up the courage to approach them, still not recognizing the woman who had once loved him. Everything has been building to this moment, when the ex who destroyed her comes crawling back, when the truth explodes in his face, when Rosalind gets to deliver the most satisfying comeback in history. Edmund had stepped away to speak with Lord Hastings about some parliamentary matter, leaving Rosalind momentarily alone near the terrace doors. The autumn breeze drifted in, cool and refreshing after the heat of the crowded ballroom. That's when Nathaniel made his move. "Pardon me," he said, approaching with the careful smile of a man trying to ingratiate himself. He didn't recognize her. Even standing this close, he had no idea who she was. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "Lieutenant Nathaniel Thorne, at your service." Rosalind turned to face him fully, watching as he executed a bow that was just slightly too deep, too eager. The desperation rolled off him in waves. "Lieutenant," she acknowledged coolly. "I couldn't help but notice you earlier. You dance exquisitely." His eyes flickered to her diamonds, to the expensive silk of her gown. She could practically see him calculating her worth. "Might I have the honor of your acquaintance?" "I'm married, Lieutenant." "Ah yes, I saw you with." He waved a hand dismissively. "Well, a dance between friends is hardly scandalous. I'm sure your husband wouldn't mind." Friends. As if they knew each other. As if he had any claim to her time or attention. "I'm quite certain he would mind," she said evenly. "My husband is rather particular about such things." Nathaniel's smile tightened with frustration. He glanced around the ballroom, clearly noting how he'd been cold-shouldered all evening. His next words came out with a hint of bitterness. "Society can be rather unforgiving of past mistakes, can't it? People hold grudges for the most ridiculous reasons." He looked at her with what he probably thought was charming self-deprecation. "I'm afraid I'm somewhat persona non grata at present. An old indiscretion following me about like a spectre." "An indiscretion," Rosalind repeated flatly. "You know how it is. A broken engagement, some hurt feelings. Years ago, mind you, but people insist on remembering." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, the young lady in question was dreadfully dull. Pleasant enough face, I suppose, but no fire. No spirit. The sort of woman who'd bore a man to tears within a year of marriage. I did her a favor, really, though I doubt she saw it that way." Rosalind felt her hands clench. Dull. Boring. No spirit. This was how he dismissed her heartbreak. How he'd justified abandoning her at the altar before 200 witnesses. "I imagine she saw it rather differently," Rosalind said, her voice like ice. "Oh, undoubtedly she had her feelings hurt. Women do take these things so personally." He shrugged. "But I'm sure she found some country squire to marry eventually. Her type always does. Modest looks, modest fortune, modest expectations. He smiled again, that charming smile that had once made her heart flutter. Now it turned her stomach. Which is why it's such a pleasure to meet a woman of obvious refinement and beauty such as yourself. Tell me, is your husband here this evening? I'd be happy to make his acquaintance. Would you? Indeed. Perhaps he might have some influence, could help smooth over some of the ridiculous gossip that's been plaguing me. I'm looking to rebuild certain connections, you understand. A gentleman in my position needs. Still no husband yet, Lady Pembroke? The words were out before he'd fully processed what he was saying, a cruel little dig at the woman he'd thought she'd become, the spinster still nursing her wounds 5 years later. He was so focused on working this wealthy stranger for connections that he'd spoken without thinking. Then his brain caught up to his mouth, and his face went white. What did you just say? Rosalind asked quietly. Nathaniel stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. She watched the recognition slam into him like a physical blow. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Rose. Lady Rosalind. Is that, it can't be. Oh, but it is. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Hello, Nathaniel. You look so different. I didn't. He was stammering now, panic flooding his features. I mean, you're. The Duchess of Thornfield, Edmund's voice came from behind her, deep and cold as winter. His hand settled possessively on her waist as he stepped to her side. My wife. If Nathaniel had been pale before, he now looked positively grey. His eyes darted between Rosalind and Edmund, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. The Duke of Thornfield, he whispered. You married the Duke of Thornfield. I did, Rosalind confirmed. 3 days after you sent that charming letter explaining how you'd married someone wealthier. Funny how things work out, isn't it? I had no idea, if I had known. If you had known what? Edmund's voice was deadly quiet. That she would marry well. That she'd become one of the most powerful women in England. Would that have changed your calculations, Lieutenant? Nathaniel's jaw worked soundlessly. Around them, people were beginning to notice the exchange. Conversations paused. Heads turned. The ton's most notorious abandoned bride, face to face with the man who'd left her at the altar. I should explain, Nathaniel managed, voice hoarse. There were circumstances. Financial pressures. My family. Needed £20,000 more than they needed honor, Rosalind finished. Yes, I read your letter. Multiple times, actually. I have it memorized. She tilted her head. How is Mrs. Thorne, by the way? Oh, that's right. She left you, didn't she? Took her money and ran. I heard she remarried quite happily. A baronet, wasn't it? Nathaniel flinched as if she'd slapped him. You called me dull, Rosalind continued conversationally. Boring. No spirit. Said I'd have made you miserable. She glanced up at Edmund, who was watching her with fierce pride and adoration. You were right about one thing, at least. I would have made you miserable. Because you never deserved me. Rosalind, It's your grace, Edmund corrected coldly. You will address my wife with the respect her station demands. Your grace. Nathaniel practically choked on the words. Please, I never meant, the things I said just now, I had no idea it was you. If I'd known. You'd have what? Altered your insults to be more flattering. Rosalind shook her head. The problem, Nathaniel, is that you did mean them. You just said them to my face instead of behind my back. You've always thought that way about me. About every woman whose worth you've calculated in pounds and prospects. By now, half the ballroom was watching. The Duchess of Worthington had her hand pressed to her mouth. Lady Ashworth looked scandalized and delighted simultaneously. Lord Crawford was whispering urgently to his wife. I was young, Nathaniel tried desperately. I made mistakes. Surely you can understand. I understand perfectly. Rosalind's voice carried clearly through the ballroom. I understand that you're a fortune hunter who sold whatever honor you possessed for money. I understand that you abandoned a woman who loved you because you found a bigger purse. And I understand that karma has a sense of humor, because here you stand, alone, desperate, scorned by the very society you tried to climb, while the dull, boring girl you left at the altar is now married to the most powerful duke in England. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The funny thing is, Rosalind continued, almost gently now, I should thank you. If you hadn't abandoned me, I would never have married Edmund. I would never have known what real love feels like. What it's like to be cherished not for my dowry or connections, but for who I am. So truly, Nathaniel, thank you. You did me the greatest favor of my life. Nathaniel stood there, humiliation naked on his face, as the full weight of what he'd lost crashed down on him. Not just a wife. Not just a fortune, Edmund's wealth made the Bennet dowry look like pocket change. But respect. Position. Love. Everything he'd ever wanted, he'd thrown away for £20,000. I think, Edmund said quietly, it's time you left, Lieutenant. I'm sure you can find some other ball to attend. Some other people to beg for patronage. It was a dismissal as final as a death sentence. Nathaniel opened his mouth one last time, as if to argue or plead or apologize. Then he looked at Rosalind's face, calm, content, victorious, and whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips. He bowed, jerky, graceless, and walked away through a ballroom that parted for him not out of respect, but out of revulsion. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Did you see his face? She's the Duchess of Thornfield. He left her at the altar. What a fool. Edmund turned Rosalind to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Are you all right? I'm perfect. And she meant it. Looking into her husband's eyes, feeling the love radiating from him, knowing that every person in this ballroom had just witnessed her triumph, she was perfect. Dance with me. Always, my love. As they waltzed across the floor to thunderous unspoken approval, Rosalind caught one last glimpse of Nathaniel disappearing through the doors. A man who'd once held her heart, now reduced to nothing by his own greed and cruelty. She felt nothing for him. No anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. Just peace. What are you thinking? Edmund murmured as they turned. That I'm the luckiest woman in England. Funny. I was just thinking I'm the luckiest man. He pulled her imperceptibly closer. You were magnificent tonight. We were magnificent. Together. And they were. As Nathaniel Thorne disappeared into the London night, reduced to nothing by his choices, Rosalind Ashcroft, Duchess of Thornfield, danced with her husband beneath glittering chandeliers, surrounded by society's admiration. The girl who'd been abandoned in her wedding dress was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who'd learned that true love, patient, devoted, real, was worth infinitely more than passionate lies. And she knew with absolute certainty that the best revenge wasn't just living well. It was living extraordinarily well with the right person by your side. Thank you so much for joining us on Rosalind's journey from heartbreak to triumph. If this story moved you, if you cheered when Nathaniel got what he deserved, if you believe in second chances and real love over empty promises, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We have so many more incredible stories coming, stories of redemption, revenge, and finding love when you least expect it. Don't miss a single one. Subscribe now, and let us know in the comments, what would you have said to Nathaniel? We'll see you in the next story.